Hello and welcome back to Processing the Process, where we capture and discuss the technical, psychological, and contextual dynamics that shape the process of creating a work of art in both the performing arts and the business world. Week by week, we have been following Anthony Mangone, owner of Trattoria 632 in Purchase, New York, as he navigates the internal struggles and external circumstances that impact the development of his restaurant business. Last week, we learned how the pandemic-induced labor shortages and supply chain disruptions have resulted in dramatic increases in costs for Anthony, which in turn adversely impacts the bottom line. We then delved into Anthony's other business ventures and examined the role that they play in his life. Today, in our final videocast of the series, we'll take a deep dive into Anthony's internal landscape and then take a look ahead with him at what he envisions for the future. So Anthony, what aspects of this business bring you the most satisfaction?
I would probably say it's seeing the appreciation in a customer's experience after they've been here for an evening or a lunch, and having them detail to me why they appreciated it, and whether it be the level of service or the product that they had for dinner that evening or the dessert. It kind of is an affirmation that we have the right product, right person in place, right team in place, and subscribes to our theory of really being a family-oriented business.
And would you say then by extension, it validates your thinking and decision-making process for putting this all in place in accordance with your theories?
It certainly does. Again, it's an affirmation of what we do, and it allows me to put my foot on the gas and know that we're headed in the right direction.
Right, exactly. Now, your way of operating requires every fiber of your being to sustain. Can you describe the toll that living that way, day in and day out, takes on you?
It's overwhelming, both from a mental and a physical standpoint, to the point where it's just simply not sustainable to operate this number of hours and have this amount of stress on any one person. It's unfortunate, but it's the nature of this business that it's required to operate like this. I guess in other instances, people tend to gear towards reliance on management. It's just not something that I've been able to get. I guess I haven't been fortunate enough to allow myself to delegate that much authority to one particular person yet.
It's the good news, bad news.
Yes.
Kind of scenario. Do you ever feel self-doubt?
All the time. It's unfortunate, but on any given day, if something is off, whether it be, I think I told you at periods of time, that this business is so habitual that on any given day prior to the pandemic, I would be able to pull up the same date the prior year and say, okay, we're going to do approximately this much business today. And it would always be off by a couple of $100 or over by a couple of $100. So you always kind of knew. And if there was ever a time where that number might have been skewed, the immediate reaction is, what did we do wrong?
Right.
As opposed to just saying it's just an aberration in the numbers, in the metrics. For me, it's always about what did we do wrong, and so that kind of self-doubt is always a part of me, unfortunately.
Then do you tend toward self-blame when things don't play out in accordance with the way you planned them?
I think you have to. You have to sit there and look at everything that went on that particular day, or what other patterns are developing, good or bad, and look at those patterns and say, if it's not the right pattern that we want, what do we do to get things back on course? So that there's always that looking at numbers of course, or as far as I'm concerned, my Bible. And so when the numbers
Exactly.
at any point in time become skewed for whatever reason, both in a good way and a bad way, right?
Right.
We like to look and figure out what patterns have been developing and what have we done differently that may have caused that change in numbers.
Which, of course, sounds like very smart business management. But I always got the impression that any little thing that was off in your mind, you would immediately go to the place of, as you said, what did we do wrong? And things like, you would wonder in the beginning, do I really have the right experience? Do I have enough knowledge? I thought I knew the right product, but I don't know. How did I not anticipate this? And it almost sounds like a superhuman demand.
Well, part of it stems from when I first became involved in this business and seeing the failure that had transpired over the first 24 months, where we started out doing really well and then things kind of went off the tracks.
Right.
And so it's not only a fear that I have, it's interesting. We had an experience here this past Sunday, and as you know, many of the employees that I have here have been here for a very long time.
Sure.
And the experience happened to have been with a dish that someone had that they did not like. And they brought it to our attention. I brought it to the attention of Des and one of the other team members. And both of them answered at the same time, that's unacceptable. We haven't had a problem like that in years. And Des actually turned around and said, we haven't had that experience since when I first started here.
Wow.
But there is something to be said about, first of all, we immediately remediated the situation. That's the first thing that needs to be done. But the level of concern that members of our own team had,
Right.
knowing the amount of effort it took to turn the ship around.
Right.
This is a business that I've said very often has a very large fail rate. And most restaurants, when they go into a downward spiral, very rarely are able to come out of it for a multitude of reasons, whether it be lack of capital to be able to infuse, not having the right people, and sometimes not just wanting to believe their own metrics.
Interesting.
Right? So when that situation occurred and I heard that answer, it again ratified that we do have all the right people in place, because their concern was equal and proportionate to my concern, knowing what it took to turn the ship around.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we can see the connection between self-doubt, self-blame, kind of throwing in anxiety, perfectionism. It's all kind of sometimes a tangled mess. Would you agree with that?
I do. I do feel that, whether maybe it's a curse in some respects, but I also look at it as, I think that it probably is an intangible that has helped us become successful here, right? So knowing that there's going to be someone there like myself who is going to sit there and have doubt all the time as to whether or not we're doing the right thing, allows us to, I think, experience new ideas. I think it helps create new ideas. I hope it fosters new ideas, and trying to learn how to do things differently so that we stay relevant That's always been
It's always
a
your
concern.
biggest concern, sure.
And during the pandemic, that was probably the most
Yeah.
obvious concern that we had.
So it's interesting then how, I'll put it in a kind of tongue-in-cheek way, Anthony's suffering, in essence, may be the secret sauce to your business success in a roundabout kind of way.
I think so. I think that when it requires you to pay attention to detail, and we've said it before that luck is the residue of being prepared. And if you're prepared and you pay attention to it, I think only good things come from it. That's just my own. And look, that's been my mantra in whatever other business I'm in as well.
Yes.
If you're prepared, and usually it works to your advantage, and that you don't get caught short. And we've used the term flat-footed.
Right.
You want to make sure that you're prepared, and if you're prepared, everything else should pretty much work out.
But it's very interesting. I'm just remembering something you said to me months ago about the fact that you are so focused on metrics, so determined to dissect them and understand what they're telling you, that on a night that's slow for you, that you would have otherwise anticipated that business would be a little bit better, that you sometimes go in your car and you drive around to see if other restaurants are slow as well.
Yeah.
That was so striking to me.
Well, I mean, look, right away you sit there and you say, is it just us that's not busy, and what did we do wrong? Again, it's always the self-doubt. And I've gotten in my car, driven through other neighborhood restaurants, by their parking areas to see what's going on, looking in, and in 98% of the times, they're suffering the same way we are that evening. And as a result, it's a sense of reassurance, like, okay, it's not just us.
Right.
But the people that work with us here, and they see when it's slow, I said, I don't understand why it's slow. And they go ahead. Go ahead. And they know exactly where I'm going, because I usually notoriously will come back and say, no, I went past these 3 places and they're all slow too. And they go, good, so you got your reassurance. And that's what they'll say to me. So
that's one of the things I will always remember. How have you been able to stay authentic and not be overwhelmed by external pressures and expectations?
We like to look at what the trends are, in terms of the food design. I think we've mentioned before that we have live entertainment.
Yes.
And that's such a big deal for us. Just by way of background, I'm not someone who's a big music aficionado. For me, it was never a big thing to have go to a venue that had live music. But when we incorporated the live music, I never realized how passionate people were about going out at night and having live music.
Right.
Never did anything for me, but we incorporated it, and I think I told you I saw our band at another venue.
Yes.
And I wanted to make them part of it. The same holds true with our menu items. So if I go out to another venue and I see something that I say, hey, wait, this is a new trend, I try to incorporate it here with us so that people, when they come in, they realize that, sure, we have the staples of every good Italian restaurant, but we've also done some other things that give it a different flair.
Right, exactly. And you have, as we have pointed out in previous videocasts, really demonstrated that you are going to stay authentic. You're going to utilize the approaches and perspectives to guide you in a way that you believe is right, regardless of what's going on
That's correct.
around you.
That's right.
No mean feat.
That's right.
In my experience.
Yes. No.
So after all you've been through, how do you define success for you personally?
For me, it's being able to execute without as little as mistakes as possible, and seeing the appreciation of our customers, the retention of our customers, which to me is a much better metric than anything else. You know, some people would equate success with profit and loss. If we did that, if I just only focused on profit and loss, we would have been out of business a long time ago. Because there were years when we were turning around the ship where we were not very profitable at all, because we were rebuilding and reinvesting in our customers. And I think retention to me is a much greater metric of success than a profit and loss statement.
Right. Well, given the 24/7 nature of the restaurant business, it seems like most, maybe all, restaurant owners struggle with the impact of those hours on their family life.
I just literally before we started this today had a conversation with someone downstairs about the negative impact that the restaurant business has on a family life. It is a 24/7 operation. It's a 7-day-a-week operation. So you don't have the typical family life of, you know, coming home from work at 6 p.m. and having dinner. It just doesn't exist. And a total juxtaposition to my prior career as an attorney, where at least on the weekends, for the most part, you were off. There's no weekends off in this business, so it's not like you could sit there and say, I'm really looking forward to Saturday. There's no Saturday.
No.
So it's, you know, or people on Friday night coming in here and saying, I'm so glad the week is over, and you sit there and say, yeah, your week may be over, mine's
Mine's just revving up
exactly.
high gear.
Correct. Yeah. So that's the unfortunate position of being involved in this business, is that you take a terrible toll on your family life.
And it sounds like a corollary to that would be that boundaries between personal and professional become blurred.
Certainly. It's a victim of that. That's one of the fatalities, or one of the dire problems of this business, is that the professional and personal life become completely blurred. Now, we've met some tremendous people out of here, and everything is wonderful as far as the people that we meet. The unfortunate part is that there really is not a difference between our personal life and this life, because this has essentially become our extension of our social life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Now, fortunately, we live locally, so it makes it a little easier to have, you know, family come and see you here and be able to integrate our social and professional life, but it's not ideal.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, certainly.
No. I'm almost going to laugh asking this question because I know the answer, but do you have time to pursue other interests?
I create time for myself. It's limited in terms of the amount of hours that I have, but certainly, as you know, we've discussed previously, I am involved in other business ventures,
right,
which to me allow me to, I guess it's keep my sanity in some ways, because I'm not sitting there focused solely on a restaurant, which could completely, you know, take over your time and your mind.
Right.
So it allows me to sit there, and that's sort of like a safe place for me to go and think about other ideas, and have that ability to be somewhat creative in other ventures.
That's interesting. Because I think when we think of interests, quote unquote, whether it's sports, the arts, whatever it happens to be, but for you, it is business.
It is. Yeah, it's a passion, right? It's of wanting to create. It's not just necessarily on the business side, but it's creating opportunities, knowing that those opportunities, that when they are created, that they turn out to be successful, to me is somewhat rewarding. It's very rewarding.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Very much so. So then, with that limited time, how do you take care of yourself physically?
That is the one thing that I have certainly incorporated over the past 24 months, a very, very regimented exercise schedule. Trying to eat right. Unfortunately, I would say I'm probably the best eater between 10 and 6 o'clock at night. Tremendous diet. I'm very regimented. And then 6 o'clock comes around and you're here and you see the pizza and you start seeing, and that's where things go off the rails. But you have to. If you don't physically take care of yourself, this business will eat you up because there are a lot of bad habits that develop, as we've discussed in the past.
Sure.
And those bad habits will only lead to a detrimental lifestyle in terms of your health, both mentally and physically.
Well, that's what I was going to get to next,
Yes.
which I think we're all kind of wondering about, which is, how do you take care of yourself psychologically?
So I've been, I guess in some ways, blessed and cursed with having dealt with a lot of adversity in my life.
Yes.
So as a result of that, from a mentally, I'm strong when it comes to being able to manage all of these different details in my life. It's sort of like exercising for the brain. So I would look at it from that, if you had to look at it away, the way you say you would exercise, whether you go for long distance running or whatever it is, when you're constantly having to deal with pressure points, it becomes very easy to deal with these psychological issues. Not easy, but manageable. I shouldn't use the word easy because it's never easy to deal with, psychological stress. It's being able to manage it correctly and not allow it to get away from you where it becomes burdensome or becomes disabling.
Is that a process, an approach that you feel you need to engage in alone?
Absolutely. It's not something that I've ever been able to off it with another person. I've been able, I've certainly engaged in therapy at times, parts and times in my life, but for the most part, it's something that I deal with internally.
Interesting. How do you have the time? And again, I feel like I know the answer again.
Yeah.
To handle all of life's responsibilities that we all have, the chores, errands, house projects, maintenance, not to mention childcare.
Well, I'm fortunate, that I have a partner in terms of my wife that handles that side of the equation. She works full time as well, but she's able.
Wow.
During these 11 years, we've had some valleys we've been in, and the kids were a lot younger when we first started this venture, so there was a lot of juggling that had to be done, and I was fortunate that she was able to primarily deal with those issues, so that it allowed me to focus on all of the other outside problems I was having, but more importantly, to keep this business afloat and moving in the right direction. So that was extraordinarily helpful, that we were able to share those responsibilities and her handle the personal side as well as she did.
Right. One thing that was striking, or I should say another thing that struck me about something you said a few months ago, was that despite the long hours that you put in, when you're at the restaurant, between the hours of 2 and 5, let's say, you said that basically it's mostly administrative work that you can do, and if you're, here in the restaurant, and that if, tying in now the psychological piece, during periods of time that are very challenging in your life, it can actually be a tricky, almost like the bewitching hours where you can find yourself drinking.
Absolutely.
You could find yourself, I think you called it, going to a dark place psychologically, again, depending upon the context at that time.
Certainly, it's a it's a downtime in most restaurants between lunch and dinner, and particularly when I was in the 2015-2016 time period, when I was prior to my first sentencing and while I was up on appeal, those were hours that there's nobody here, so there's not a lot going on, and you wind up engaging in habits that, like drinking, that really are not very good for both a mental and physical healthy lifestyle. And I think a lot of restaurants suffer from employees that will drink during those hours. It's not uncommon for the restaurant industry to have employees that maybe sneak a bottle of liquor into their knapsacks or whatever, and it is a problem in this industry.
Wow. How did you, when you would get in that space, so to speak, how long would it take before you would notice that this was becoming a pattern? And
I noticed
you were
it.
On a downward slope.
Yeah, no, I noticed it while I was in it.
You did?
Yeah, no, I knew it was not a good time period for me, and recalling when I was away, I would think about those days, and I would say to myself, each day that I got closer to being released, I would say to myself, the one thing I know is I'm never going back to those days again. So I made it my business to know that I would never put myself in that situation ever again, where I would be feeling sorry for myself or allowing outside forces to put myself in a position where I would be sitting in a restaurant at between 2 and 5 in the afternoon, drinking my sorrows away.
Although it sounds very human.
Particularly, yeah.
Yeah,
it's certainly not an excuse to have that as an outlet to say, well, these are hours that are slow, that this is what you do. There were a lot of outside forces that were adversely affecting me at the time, and definitely caused me to exhibit poor judgment.
So, thinking about how you spoke about your other ventures as giving you an opportunity actually to think creatively, to execute things creatively. Thinking specifically about the restaurant, and you began to address it a bit. How does Trattoria 632 feed your creative needs when you're here and thinking about it?
I think that while I'm here, and tying back in the self-doubt portion, we always want to make sure that we're relevant. So what we try to do is, what can we do differently, right? What can we do differently that sets us apart from other restaurants? We're a standalone location. You have to drive here. There's no town around us.
Right.
So right off the bat, I always look at that as a disadvantage. So I always sit there and I say, there's nobody that's attracting traffic to our area. So what do we need to do? And so we try to make sure, whether it's our dishes are creative, whether it's the entertainment, something always along the lines of making sure that we're staying on top of our game, whether it means speaking to our team and figuring out ways for them to be more interactive with customers. we've brought on some great additions, particularly over the past 6 months, people who are very customer oriented, that will go and sit down with, I saw it happen last evening in front of my eyes, sitting down with customers and discussing the different dishes and wine and having just a very social conversation with them, not having had any prior history with them. So to me, that to me is creativity that happens, organically. And not something that you're sitting there going to a marketing book for and figuring out how to drive a customer in.
Well, I think one of the things that you spoke about, that you try to focus on, as opposed to more traditional marketing approaches, is how can you incorporate the community into the business. And it struck me that all of the different initiatives that you have already incorporated and those you are thinking about are highly creative. And that's a great opportunity for you, whether it was the guest bartenders, the purchase folks.
We do, right? we and I know we've touched upon it before, but we are blessed with having the SUNY Purchase across the street from us. They have a very, very creative performing arts department.
Oh, yes.
They have a very creative music department, and I told you how we brought in a group of young adults who came in and did an open mic jazz night.
Yes.
Early on, when we had first started, when I had taken over, I wanted to figure out ways to incorporate the student bodies at both Manhattanville and at SUNY Purchase. And so what we would do is we would bring in guest bartenders. It was Manhattanville was Wednesday night because that was their big social night out in Manhattanville. And the big social night out at SUNY Purchase was Thursday. So we would have a guest bartender on Wednesdays from Manhattanville, guest bartender from SUNY Purchase on Thursdays. Those nights were late and they were really crowded.
I would imagine.
But what it did was we would give out complimentary free slices of pizza, and what we were essentially doing was we were marketing in our own way. We were introducing our location to all of these young adults who were going to be there, whether it be that they were going to be there in their senior year or they were going to be there for 3 more years. Almost all the time, the people that would come in would be the same people that when they graduated, they had their graduation parties here that evening. So there is a nexus between between everything we do. We just try to go about it in a different approach. We're not particularly good at social media. It's maybe something that looking forward that maybe I would want to perfect a little bit better. It's something that I find just from a personal standpoint, I don't know how much success you can really get out of posting a dish every evening. I don't know if that's really going to drive people to your restaurant. I would want to figure out a way to get people in and retain them and figure out that approach. To me, that's a much more successful approach, and it's worked for us.
Yes.
So as opposed to posting a picture and hoping somebody sees it on Instagram and drives them in, I still haven't, and maybe I just need to do more research on it, I still haven't figured out if that's a right approach for us, per se. And I know that the young adults that are part of our community are very much fascinated with social media. So we do have to figure something out to kind of bridge that gap. But for us, it's incorporating the local community, whether it be what we did during the graduation ceremonies, where even this past year with Harrison High School, where we asked all of the families that were coming to bring in the pennants of the different universities that they were going to. We like to know, it gives us a sense of satisfaction of seeing many of these young adults who started at Purchase Community House, went through the system, and now are graduating, and we know where they're going to school. I think it gives a sense of community. I really do believe people say that's our community, local community restaurant. I had 2 customers in last night. To give you a short anecdote, they were in, they said, how's everything going? I said, great. They said, we're out to dinner as a husband and wife, and our kids ordered home delivery from you guys. And I said, well, that ratifies that the process works. And they laughed, but I was dead serious.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, their children had ordered delivery and mom and dad were out at the bar having dinner and a glass of wine. To me, there is no better measure of success than that we've captured that family.
Right.
In more than just one way, because their children could have ordered Uber Eats from anyone, but they ordered from us.
Exactly. So I think when you're talking about becoming an integral part of the community, it's interesting to me how you've built layer upon layer upon layer of community among your staff, community between your staff and customers, community between customers, community, integrating the people in this geographic area with your restaurant. And everything is syntonic, it seems to me.
Absolutely.
And that seems to be your competitive advantage, if you will. This is what you are known for.
Absolutely. And there is no, as far as I'm concerned, the best measure for us in terms of showing our, community, bona fides is when we do our customer appreciation event.
Right.
Which is, unfortunately, we haven't been able to do as a result of the pandemic this year with, overcrowding the restaurant. But on that evening, we probably service 350 people that come through the door, and it's done by, we send out an email to our list saying we want you to come in, and everything is gratis that evening. We don't sit there and mail it in and give people just a pasta dish. We do everything from jumbo shrimp cocktail to prime rib, and we put all the different top shelf liquors up. And when I first started it, the people that work with me thought I was completely insane. Now they sit there and they start telling me what day are we going to do Customer Appreciation Day. And what they have done now is they've taken it a step further. They've started to incorporate some of our different liquor purveyors and said to them, we're giving back to our customer base, which is our community.
Right.
What can you do to give back a little bit? And they will always donate, whether they're donating certain liquors or coming in that evening to do tastings with certain wines.
Right.
It's just a great feeling to kind of see this event, what it's turned into.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Can't wait till
we're able to do it
pandemic
again.
issues no longer impede
Without a doubt.
that. Well, looking ahead, of course, there's no way we can even know what going to happen tomorrow, but if you were to hazard a guess, do you think that you'll remain in this business, expand it, sell it, delve more deeply into one of your other ventures? What do you imagine for yourself?
So I think that it's probably a very fluid question because on any given, if it's a crazy Saturday night, I sit there and I say, there's no way I could sustain this lifestyle. And but what I do realize though is that we have built a very successful operation, and as a result, a lot of effort went into it. So to cast it away and say that I would exit, quickly, is probably not reality. Someone said to me, well, what would you do to replace the adrenaline rush that you get from it? It was another restaurateur, and I said, oh no, I could overcome it. And they said, not once you get going in this business. And I think there is a very, very strong sense of truth to that, because in as much as I get frustrated at times, there is an energy that goes through you when you know it's going to be busy, that it's almost like a high that you get. Particularly when you're successful in getting everything done, and at the end of the evening sitting there saying, wow, that was a great evening, and we did it successfully without very little hiccup. So, I just know from a physical and mental standpoint, it's not something I could say that I could see myself long-term staying in. But I would say probably within the next 5 years, I would like to see some type of an exit strategy in terms of whether it be bringing on a partner, or in the alternative, bringing in management personnel that would be able to handle the day-to-day operations. I just hope that I'm capable enough of letting go a little bit, if that was the route that I was able to take, because it is difficult. It is difficult knowing that you do things a certain way, and knowing how you pay attention to certain metrics. If the metrics were off, how would you satisfy your desire to come in here and start to micromanage again? I think that's probably a difficult problem that I'll have, but we'll cross that bridge, I guess, when we get there.
Are you okay with allowing this process to unfold, and not knowing, or not try? I really should say, not trying to know or convincing yourself that you know.
Well, it just probably is not something that it's hard for me to let go of certain things.
Right.
So just thinking back to my days when I was away and sending recipes home to the guys that I would see in a local magazine or in a newspaper. So it is hard. It is hard to detach yourself, but at some point, it's going to be necessary, from just looking at it from a mental and physical health standpoint. As my children are getting older, that I want to be able to divest myself of some of the responsibilities that come along with this and the amount of hours that I'm here.
Right. Tricky.
Very tricky. Very tricky.
Tricky if you still want to hang on to the business in
That's
some
it.
way, shape, or form, as opposed to selling out.
Correct.
And even just as I use that term, selling out, which of course has a really negative connotation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Funnily enough.
Yes, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, when we first spoke, almost 2 years ago, I think now, about examining and sharing your process, you thought that it could be an interesting way to give back, a vehicle that could allow you to give back. What do you think at that time you were hoping to achieve?
Well, I like to think that the experiences that I've had, particularly someone who was not involved in the restaurant industry prior to getting involved, that I would be able to take those experiences and somehow use it on an educational format, so that people would be able to take this game plan that I lived and be able to figure out how to deal with certain experiences, or understand what the business is really about. There are a lot of books out there. I don't know if a book is something that I would want to do, but there are a lot of books out there from restaurateurs that are really more about self-promotion, rather than being a textbook on what a person needs to do in order to develop a successful restaurant. And a lot of these are interchangeable with other businesses as well, but I think experience is probably the best teacher. And so if I were able to take these experiences and somehow incorporate them into a lesson plan for someone, and let them know all the different ups and downs of the business and what you need to do to stay relevant and be on top, that would be self-fulfilling for me and gratifying.
Absolutely. And I think that we have been able to capture these experiences in great depth and breadth through this video series. So
Absolutely.
You may write a book one day, but in the meantime, we do have, I think, this treasure trove of invaluable information that could be, a first step toward that end. And I want you to know that it has been such a treat.
Oh, yes, for me as well.
To illuminate your process and tell your story. So on behalf of all of our viewers, I thank you for your remarkable candor and insight and your commitment to sharing your feelings, your experiences, your perspectives. And I think that everyone would agree that Anthony has given us this richly detailed, fascinating glimpse into the inner workings of the restaurant business and into the interior landscape of a true artist. I really think so.
I appreciate that.
Whose extraordinary life, I feel, is reflected in every aspect of Trattoria 632.
I truly appreciate that. Thank you so much, and I appreciate everyone who did, view this, and I hope it was somewhat informational, educational, and entertaining.
Absolutely,
Yes.
It's been a wonderful opportunity, and who knows where we might progress from here. But we do thank you all.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you
for taking this journey with us, and we will let you know of any other journeys that you might want to be a part of moving forward.
Thank you.
So again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sherri. Thank you.
Have a good day.